Hey everyone. For the update this week, one of the questions I get asked is, what is solar power going to look like come winter? Which I don't know yet. I've only gotten these things set up since about May, so I'm not sure. So what I thought I would do is, I'll update you guys on that as we go, but give you an idea of how much power I've been getting in over the last 7 days. Today is October 13th, so we'll go back to October 5th. Now, one thing to keep in mind is if the system tops out and it's set to stop at 90% battery, it will stop reporting power because it's not getting any power to come in to measure. So bear that in mind. I did get recently another 6 kilowatt battery to go on, which I have not put any power into. So that means the system is now running at a state where it's not going to top out, at least not. If I don't use it for a couple of days, it will top out, but it's not going to top out anytime soon. So these numbers should be fairly accurate. On October 5th, with just the 4 100-watt panels, during the day, I was able to generate 942 watts. Now, it didn't start till 9 a.m., and I got a little power in at 4, but it was just a tiny bit of power. It really stopped around 2 o'clock. The real big power coming in stopped at 1. That was on October 5th. On the 6th, things slid more to the right as you look from time going from lower to higher. Again, stopping at about 1 o'clock, we got 920 watts in. On October 7th, it was overcast until about 1 o'clock, where we got the most power in, and overall it was only 424 watts. October 8th, we started off with a sunny day, so the power started out, and we ended up with 723 watts. We got our first feed of power in at 9 a.m., and I noticed it trailed off after 1 o'clock in the afternoon again. October 9th, 339 watts. October 10th, 281 watts. Again, kind of an overcast day. That was Thursday. On Friday, the 11th, 856 watts. Part of that was me working on the deck, causing a shadow, but it still was 856 watts. Now we take a look at October 12th. So yesterday, sunny day, and I had 1.15 kilowatts of power that was generated. Now, my noon times are always going to be a little less because there's a tree about dead center at noon to the panel, which casts a shadow over the panel. So I'll get power at 11, I'll get power at 1, and then it kind of trails off. 1 o'clock usually seems to get more power for some reason. I had 329 watts come in at 1 o'clock of that 1.15 kilowatts. So that's what I'm getting right now. The panels are angled properly so that the sun should be hitting square on without casting any shadow. But again, it's just 400 watts of panels. In theory, when I put the other 4 panel system together and gateway that in so that it's in series with the 4 that are already there, that should give me about the capability of 800 watts. So that 1.15 kilowatt day could turn into a 2 kilowatt day. Remember though, that my system is a 12 kilowatt system, and it's set right now for 50% to come in from the outside, or from the electrical grid, and 90% total power. So there's a 40% gap in there, which means that 6 kilowatts will be from grid. The other 6 kilowatts will be coming off of the power from the sun. At 1 kilowatt a day, that would take 6 days, assuming no usage of the system and no loss. And typically it loses about 2% overnight. But that would mean that it would take, for that other just under 6 kilowatts that it would want, because again, it's 10% less, so 5.4 kilowatts, would take about 6 days. Okay, it would take a full week to top that off, assuming no other use of the system. You put a second panel in there, that would take it down to 3. As it's starting to turn colder, I'm turning off gradually the power coming into the unit that I use for cooking, which is a 2 kilowatt unit, which does not have the ability to instantly flip. That means if the power goes off going into that, there will be a delay, a noticeable delay, as far as electronics are concerned, between when it realizes that the power's off and cuts over. So if I'm running it off of solar, for example, I've got it set for 50% solar, and it gets below the threshold limit, it's going to want to pull power from the grid, and there's a cutover time to it when it does that, because it's trying to keep that balance in there, keep that reserve that I set up. And these are manually settable. When that happens, that means that there's things that are on there could turn off and have to be manually turned back on. But that system is getting its power off of another set of panels. That set of panels is going to be repurposed to become the 4-set panel that I've got. Plus, it's running through a window right now, as opposed to having a permanent wall set up at this point. Something I just couldn't get to this year. So that panel will be taken offline, and the system will be decommissioned so that the 2 kilowatt unit will have to run from the 12 kilowatt unit. I've got another unit downstairs that's running a fan to help circulate heat in another part of the house. That's running off a 768 watt unit, and that's running off of electrical power. So if the power goes out, that unit will kick over, and again, it's not going to matter too much to the fan that it suddenly doesn't have power for a second or two. It'll just start back up again when the power is re-enabled. But what that gives me is that buys me time, that if the power is off for, let's say, more than an hour, I can take the plug that went into the grid, plug that into the 12 kilowatt unit, and let it pull power from the 12 kilowatt unit. So when it gets down to its threshold level and needs to extract power from the grid again, it'll be getting it from stored solar. Now, why did I go with another 6 kilowatt unit? You got to pay attention, if you're going to be doing solar, to any kind of sales or discounts that you can possibly get. If you're looking to add something and you don't want to add too much to the price tag, a 6 kilowatt unit, they're running at about 50 cents per kilowatt. So a 6 kilowatt unit was $3,000. So at $3,000, the company was offering, I guess to compete with Prime Days, about 33% off. I was able to save almost $1,000 off the unit itself. In addition to that, it's an EcoFlow unit. I'm on the EcoFlow Rewards program. I was also able to get a $200 discount on top of that. So that saved me over $1,000 on a $3,000 unit. Seeing as I'd already paid off 95% of my initial with the inverter in the first 6 kilowatt unit, I added that. Bear in mind, in the United States, you can get a tax incentive to go solar. It's not based on when you bought it. It's based on when you install it, when you start using it. Because I got the 6 kilowatt unit, the extra battery, I put that into service. I can now declare that on my taxes as well. The tax rebate I get will be enough for me to purchase a smart panel, which runs about $1,800. I'll be able to get a discount off of it because of my rewards membership. But I'll have saved enough money to pay for more than just that panel. So that'll allow me to get a smart panel. An EcoFlow smart panel is the equivalent of a sub panel that you would manually throw the switch on, basically. What it does is it has on it those important circuits that you want in your house. Now, unfortunately, houses weren't built that way, right? The electricians don't come through and say, okay, here are the things that you want to keep on in the house. So here's your heat and your, for me, I've got a water pump. It'd be the water pump. But my washer and dryer would be over on another would be on different circuits, right? So that they're separated off based off of what priority you would have should the power go out. Typically, they're whatever the run's going to be and however they've got it wired up. Because of that, it makes the sub panels a little bit trickier, because you may have other things in there that you might not want to have on that. For me, I already have a sub panel. So some of what I want's already on a sub panel to begin with. But by putting those breakers that are important, like the one that goes to your heating system. If you've got blown air heat, you got to be able to run that fan. Something's got to be able to spark that heater off to pump power in. If it's electric, obviously, it's going to have its own circuit on that sub panel. The sub panel gets its power from the main panel. When the main panel power cuts off, it then switches over to get power from the battery unit. But the interesting thing about the smart panel is it also will keep your battery unit charged. So right now, my battery unit, the inverter and those two batteries, is plugged into a typical outlet. With the sub panel, that would have a different connector that goes into the sub panel itself. It will not only be able to draw power from the sub panel to keep the batteries at the reserve that I've stated, but should the power go off, that exact same cable is now reversed, and the power, instead of flowing to the battery, now flows to the sub panel, which will then light up any of the breakers that are in there, will keep them running. Because remember, it's a sub panel. It was already getting power from the initial panel. All that's going to happen as far as the devices on the sub panel are concerned is nothing. The cutover is instantaneous, so that the sub panel will not notice that the power had gone out, but the main panel will be cut off. Now, that's one thing I want to check on. I know that the stuff on the main panel isn't going to go, and it's important from a electrical standpoint that you're not pushing any power outside of your house, because if they need to come work on your electrical line, you don't want them having a live line. So that sub panel has to cut off the power going to the main panel. It can monitor the main panel, right? When the power comes back on, it's going to switch back to using the main power, the grid power. But while it's off, nothing's flowing the other way. So that connection is one way. Power comes in from the main to the sub. But the power connection from the sub panel to the battery unit is bidirectional. Power can flow into the batteries and power can flow from the batteries. But what that panel will allow me to do is not worry about the circuits that I need to keep powered should the power go out. Now, my computer equipment and things I already have on UPSs, so that's a different discussion with those. But having my heater be able to pull from that sub panel. I'll have heat in the house should the power go out. I would have water should the power go out, because the well pump could run off of this as well. It has the capability of running a well pump. So I'll add that to the system after I file my taxes next year and have enough money from the rebate, thanks to the federal government, to buy that panel. From there, it's a question of what I want to do for batteries and panels and where I want to go. For me, I think I'm going to leave it at the 12 for at least another year unless a really good sale comes on. I have a design in my mind for setting up one of the tracking panels. Now, when I started this project, they didn't have tracking panels that just tracked the sun so that the panel moved up and down. They tracked it so it would move east, west, and north, south, so up and down and left and right, but they didn't have just the up and down part. Now they do. Go figure. After I built one myself, which, I can get the controller that's in there and I can add that capability to the system I already have. But this other system will track east, west, and north, south. I'm going to put it up above ground, and that's going to require some particular engineering for it to make sure that it's stable and safe. So there'll be a deck built around it. It's going to be off the ground at least 8 feet, plus it's already got a 3-foot pole to it. And that's why it's going up, is because the pole that comes with it is only 3 feet. So I'm constructing a unit around it that's going to protect it and make it as solid as if it were on the ground itself. So once that's in place, that will be tracking the sun east, west, and north, south. For me, that means the east will have, it won't have to go as far east as it would in another area because of the trees that I've got. But about 8 o'clock in the morning, it should be able to get power, and it'll be facing more east. It can then track its way across, but keep in mind that with a system like this, the east-west is the primary movement. It may move a little up and down. As I look at the course of the sun across the sky, the north-south movement of the sun is not as pronounced as the east-west. As a matter of fact, it almost seems to be drawing a line across as it goes across the sky from east to west as far as the north and south is concerned. So the panel up and down isn't going to have to move as much as the east-west part's going to. And that's what I found looking at just doing the numbers for up and down as far as time in the year. As I looked at the calculations for that, there's very little range within a month. Month to month, it may be a couple of degrees, but across the month, not so much. So the lion's share of the work will be done with the east-west. So that's why I want to get a unit like that, add that into the mix. So that'll give me a winter of 800 watts capability, so we can see what the winter in New England looks like. I am in Vermont, so in the United States, winter is coming. So we'll see how that goes. What it means for me as far as the solar is concerned is the sun was above the trees. The sun's now going to be within the tree line, but a lot of my trees have leaves, and the leaves are going away. So the tree line will be less shadowy. It'll have less blockage from the tree line going forward than it had over the summer. So we'll see how that goes out. I'll have those numbers to report to you guys for come spring, after we see what the winter was like. And then we'll have another couple of toys to play with. First, the smart panel. I can put part of it together, but I'm going to have an electrician come in and finish it off. Connect the main box to the sub panel, which I could do and then have an electrician come in and check it, or I could just have an electrician come in and just do the whole thing in one shot and get it done. I will set up the breakers and things in the other panel so that the stuff is all there for the electrician. All we'll have to do is just connect things up. And we'll have another set of panels hooked up off of this solar tracker. And we'll see what that adds. In theory, I could add 6 panels to it, which would add another 600 kilowatts or 600 watts, coming from that, which will put me at 1.4 kilowatts total. Probably going to start out with just 4 panels on that, 4 100-watt panels, just so the system stays the same across, and we can see what that extra 400 watts lends in with its ability to track the sun. The downside to a system that tracks the sun is it has to have power in order to run the servos, the actuators, to move the panel. So there'll be some loss that we'll need to monitor there to see how much power it actually is using to move those actuators. But at the same time, it should be pretty straightforward to put a system together and just let it go. Probably use a new small battery unit from EcoFlow to run the panel and set it up that way for now until I figure out how I want to wire it into the house. I know a lot of people will put it and they have a regular battery that they have to hook up and put in a shed and everything. I'm just going to probably hook it up to a regular EcoFlow, run the wiring into the house so that the battery has always got heat and is always protected, and I won't have to worry about that part of it. And that way we'll get a chance to see what it's going to be like with that system over the course of the year, and we'll have something to compare it to, because the 4-panel system's been up for a couple of months now, so I've got some good July-August data from having that 4 100-watt panel in place. I can then compare it next year to a second 4-panel system in place, and then perhaps this one will be running at that point as well, and we'll have 1.2 kilowatts of potential power coming in. Now remember, that's 1.2 kilowatt hours. As the sun is less up in the sky, right, as long as I have less sunlight, that's less hours. So the sun would have to be in the sky with 1.2 kilowatts for about 4 hours to charge up one of the 6 kilowatt batteries, which would mean 2 days to charge the entire system. And the downside to that, of course, is the amount of time it takes. We've got less sun, right? It's also possible that it will get less power from the sun as it drops in the sky as well. The inverse to that, however, is that the solar panels lose efficiency when they get hot. In the winter, probably not going to get up to the threshold where they could lose efficiency. So we won't get an efficiency loss on that, but at the same time, we may not be getting as much brightness from the sun. We will definitely, though, have less sunlight during the day. With the 1.2 kilowatt, that probably means it'll top itself off every day during the summer. And that's when the conundrum becomes apparent. If I can get more power, but I don't have a way to store it, do I want to get a way to store it? Which is why I grabbed the other 6 kilowatt. So we'll see how all of this goes. I'll keep you guys apprised of what we've got going. Just to give a quick recap, inverter and 12 kilowatts on the main unit. Inverter with 2 kilowatts worth of power that I use for my kitchen. And then I've got a small unit that I recharge my cell phones and my tablets with. I have another small unit that's running a fan to circulate heat in part of the house. And I have a little tiny unit that I got just to see what EcoFlow's equipment was like that currently doesn't have any use. It's sitting off to the side. That has a lead acid battery in it as opposed to a lithium ion. Recap on those. Lead acid batteries, to maintain the life, you don't want to bring them down below 50%. So if it's a 500 watt unit, you can't use more than 250 watts of it. If you want to extend the battery life, lithium ions can go down to 20%. So they have a larger range of power that you'll get out of a lithium ion. This was an old early unit that EcoFlow put out that was lead acid, and I'm using it as the pickup and bring out to run the actuators. So I'll pick that unit up, bring it outside, plug it in, move the actuator, and then unplug everything, bring it back into the house. So that's the system I've got right now. Come winter, it'll be down to just the power flowing into the main EcoFlow unit, the 12 kilowatt, and then I'll be pulling power from that unit to power anything else in the house. Main reason I got the unit originally was just so I would have some backup power in the house. If the power goes out, I want to run some heat or something like that. I have a situation where one of the heaters will just kick on if it doesn't have any power coming in, which is great for keeping heat in the house, but it's not able to move it. It's a wall-mounted heater, so by having this extra little unit over there with a fan to pull the heat away from that wall, it allows it to circulate, so I'll have a way of circulating the heat even if the power goes out, which will be better in long term. And it's only running 25 watts to run the fan, so it's not a great expense to run this little fan all the time. But that's what I've got for a configuration. That's what I've got for numbers so far in October, almost November at this point. Little late getting it out this week because scrambling to get the rest of the porch done so I can get the last couple of pieces in there, and I had to rebuild the stairs. So that's what I got for you guys this week, and I will talk to you all next week.